Today we're going to be talking about the magical weight loss drugs that are GLP-1s, or as you guys probably know them as Ozempic, Mounjaro, and Wegovy. Now these have been taking the world by storm for the last 2 years. You have seen your favorite Hollywood stars drop 30 pounds, have sunken eye sockets, and look like completely different people in the space of a matter of months, and that is laid at the hands of these GLP-1 drugs. So today we're going to be talking about their efficacy, we're going to be talking about what the science says, potentially some of the concerns around these weight loss drugs. So hopefully by the end of this episode you'll be much more clued up on exactly what they are, and hopefully we'll be able to dispel some myths in the process. So Alina, take us through how exactly these drugs work.
So there are three main GLP drugs that are on the market right now. That's Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Ozempic. In the UK, if you are not diabetic, you're really only allowed to take Wegovy and Mounjaro.
I think that's an important thing just to touch on there is these are medications for diabetics initially, and the weight loss happened to be this happy side effect. I think that's just a really important thing to clarify before we continue.
So what these drugs do, they basically mimic hormones that naturally regulate appetite, blood sugar, so that's why they were initially made for diabetics, and digestion. So GLP, so the chemicals that are in your drug, they send a signal to your brain that you're full, and it kind of slows down the emptying of your stomach. What is interesting, so Mounjaro, which is one of the two drugs that you can take in the UK, is what is called a dual agonist. So basically what this means, it doesn't just have the hormone GLP-1 in it, but also GIP, which is another hormone that controls insulin and fat metabolism. But in general, to make it quite easy, people tend to eat less when they are using that drug because they feel full for longer, and thus they experience quite a lot of weight loss over time.
Yeah, these are just drugs essentially that help you to eat less food.
Yeah.
It's not going to magically turn the pizza you ate into like a fat burning concoction. You can't just go out and binge on loads of food and still lose fat. The way these drugs work is they control your calorie intake.
Yeah.
And they do that by, as you stated, reducing your appetite and actually also reducing your desire towards a lot of foods as well. So anecdotally, I've had somebody describe it to me as if you have a plate of pizza and you have a plate of broccoli, you kind of look at the two plates and feel somewhat indifferent to your desires. So you're not compulsively going, oh, I'm going to eat all of this pizza and finish it off. You're very much looking at it and thinking, well, yeah, maybe I'll have a slice because it's good. But then once I feel like I've had enough, then I can move on with my day. Whereas I think one of the big drivers in the sort of obesity epidemic we have now is this overconsumption that is maybe derived by this sort of dopaminergic compulsive eating of, that's yummy, I've got to have more. That's still yummy, I've got to have more. And basically this almost like switches that off, or not switches it off, but I've heard it turn down like a volume knob. And so food noise is a very big term that's thrown around. And so you're just not thinking about food and you've not got this same compulsive nature towards it. And so as a result, they're really effective for weight loss. Mm-hmm. But what exactly does the science say when it comes to that? Because we've heard lots of stories, lots of anecdotes. What exactly is in the literature?
The literature basically confirms that it is a very, very good drug for weight loss. So all of the clinical trials that were done and all of the surveys that were done had participants that were obese. And that is the target group that these drugs are for. So for example, in the UK, if you want to do it under NHS guidance, you have to be of a BMI of 30 or above.
Yeah, so 30, just for context, BMI of 30 is clinically obese, as you said. If you're a man who's about 5'10", the average height in this country, that's about 95 kilos and above. If you're a bit smaller, if you're a lady, maybe 5'5", that's about 82 kilos and above, just for reference.
So yeah, then you can get any of these drugs under NHS guidance, or you have to be of a BMI of equal or above 27, but you also have to have a metabolic condition, such as being pre-diabetic, high blood pressure, fatty liver. So these weight loss drugs are not for everyone, but for obese people, they are really, really, really effective.
And that's where most of the studies have been done on, right?
Exactly. All of the clinical trials that have been done so far have been done on obese participants. Interesting to note here is also that these clinical trials have been administered by the same companies that do make those drugs, but both of them show that it is super effective. So the Wegovy trial was 68 weeks long, and participants saw up to 17% weight loss on the highest dose, and up to 85% of participants lost at least 5% of starting weight. So even that number, 85% of participants, kind of shows it's not an absolute magic pill, because the difference between 5% and 17% is quite drastic, even in a clinical trial where basically every other external factors are cared for. So you have the food at certain times, you are not tempted by pizza, stuff like that. So even then it's a huge difference. And kind of the same things were found in the Mounjaro clinical trial. Here, 89% of participants lost at least 5% of their starting weight. Interestingly, Mounjaro seems to be a little bit more effective. So on the highest dose, there was a weight loss of up to 22.5% weight loss. Then to say the trial was also 4 weeks longer, but still the overall amount of weight loss was higher on Mounjaro than it was on Wegovy.
So yeah, that's 22%, 22.5% on Mounjaro and 17% on Wegovy. So there or thereabouts in sort of similar realms. I don't think it's necessarily right to then declare Mounjaro as the winner of the GLP-1 wars, but just something that's quite interesting to note. And you said there also on the Mounjaro trial that 89% of the population lost at least 5%. And in the previous trial, it was 85% of the population lost at least 5%, which I think the first thing that I think there is like, you've got 15% of people that didn't even lose 5% of their body weight in a year. And so that's the first thing you can kind of point out as like, oh, this is not, as you had said, it's not a magic pill. This is not something that is magically going to melt fat off your body. There are 15% of people there who probably hardly lost 3 kilos.
Yeah, and that's in a clinical setting. If you look at the numbers for people who actually do it in real life, it's not a completely different picture, but it is slightly different. So there have been surveys done, and the average amount of body weight lost was 11.9%, which is still an amazing number, especially if you're clinically obese and you have any form of health side effects. This amount of weight loss can give you a completely different life. So that's not to say that these drugs, just because now there's, let's say, an 8% loss, or you lose 8% less body weight, it's not effective. It's still highly, highly effective, but it's not as much of a magic pill as one could think it is from the clinical trials.
Yeah, I mean, if we just roughly ballpark it at 10 to 15% of body weight lost if you start taking this over the course of the year, that is, to contextualize this, an 100 kilo person going down to 85 kilos potentially, which is a massive life improvement, a massive probably health improvement as well. So are there any concerns about taking this drug? Because by that logic, everyone who is overweight should be taking this drug in order to improve their health markers. But obviously, we're not recommending it for every person because it's only available to obese people. So why is it not available to everybody?
Well, one reason why is that this form of weight loss also includes quite a lot of muscle loss. So studies have shown that about 25 to 39% of the weight lost is fat-free mass over the span of 36 to 72 weeks. Now, all of that is not just muscle. Fat-free mass can also mean connective tissue, blah, blah, blah. But a big chunk of that fat-free mass is going to be muscle. And that is quite drastic because basically what that means is you don't just slow down your metabolism through the loss of the fat, but you're also slowing your metabolism even more through losing so much muscle mass. And if you've watched our metabolism podcast, you also now know that muscle is a lot more metabolically active than fat is. And so it is actually harder to maintain your weight on that lower weight if you lose so much muscle mass. And for some, there's also an impaired glucose regulation, which can risk the loss of insulin sensitivity. And especially if you're old, so let's say you're in your late 50s, you're already losing muscle mass as it is, just through age. And if you lose so much muscle mass on top of that, that can also lead to reduced strength, reduced immunity, more falls, and so on. So there are certain risks, but if you are clinically obese, for a lot of people, those risks don't outweigh the benefits. So that's why these drugs can be administered for people who have a BMI of 27 and above.
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about drugs like this, it's always a cost-benefit analysis.
Yep.
And actually the costs, I would say, as a whole, aren't devastating by any stretch, which is obviously why they're legal, why they've been approved, because they're definitely not. It's not like they've been proven to be cancer causing or anything of that sort of dangerous nature. But to your point, if we lose muscle, we know how important of a metabolic tissue muscle can be for our overall health as well as for our quality of life. That can be, detrimental to somebody's quality of life if they are a 70-year-old woman who's only a little bit overweight to start losing 5 kilos, 10 kilos, and 30%, so 3 kilos of that be muscle. That can have a really big impact on overall quality of life and actually arguably be detrimental to health overall. But with that being said, all weight loss will come with the loss of muscle, generally speaking. However, there are things we can do to mitigate the loss of muscle during that. And so most importantly, if you are going to be taking these weight loss drugs, is how do we preserve our muscle mass as much as possible? And so there's two main levers we can pull on to achieve this. And that is consistent resistance strength training. And so doing that roughly, there's no sort of clinical advice on it, but 2 to 3 times a week to optimize your muscle retention. And then second of all is keeping your protein intake nice and high. So making sure you're aiming for 1.8 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight is going to keep you in a good spot to make sure you're maintaining as much muscle. But this is the same advice we would give if you are losing weight with or without weight loss drugs. And I think this is an important thing to hit home is the mechanisms are still the same. You are still restricting your calorie intake, and that is how you are achieving this fat loss. And so whether calorie intake is achieved with the assistance of weight loss drugs or without the assistance of weight loss drugs, you are risking muscle tissue, and you do need to be doing those two things, eating a high protein diet and training regularly, in order to preserve as much muscle tissue as possible.
Protein intake just becomes even more important during these weight loss drugs because some of my clients say because they're not hungry at all, they eat so little, then to fit your protein is even harder. Like for example, whereas let's say you're an average man and on a diet you would eat, let's say 2,000 calories. Someone who's on a weight loss drug might only want to eat 1,300 calories. Now fitting about 100 grams of protein in those mere 1,200 calories is going to be really, really tough. So while everyone should prioritize protein, for those that are on weight loss drugs, it's even more important because it involves so much more thinking.
Yeah, and there's almost this paradoxical nature of high protein diets are more filling. We're always recommending high protein diets because it's going to make you feel more full. But then you're telling somebody who is feeling more full as a result of the GLP-1s to eat something that's going to make them feel more full, which could potentially make them eat even fewer calories. And this is something, again, I've seen anecdotally of people who take these drugs and they don't eat enough.
Yeah.
And that can, yes, it's fantastic for being in a calorie deficit, but that can come at the cost of hormonal health, things like testosterone. It can come at the cost of your sleep quality. It can come at the cost of your energy day to day. It will definitely come at the cost of your training performance. So again, in the interest of retaining muscle tissue, you almost want to be more diligent with your nutrition if you're taking these weight loss drugs than if you weren't. Because naturally, your body will start sending you your signals if you're not taking the drug saying like, eat more, you're hungry, do more. But because you've kind of toned down those signals, you don't have this sort of auto-regulatory feedback going on from your body.
And something else that I think is really important to mention is these drugs only physiologically reduce your hunger. And they do not reduce emotional eating, stress eating, and so on, which is one of the big drivers why obesity is so common today. And that is most likely also the reason why some people have a really hard time, even on those weight loss drugs, to lose weight. Simply because sometimes when you've been working, let's say, for 10 hours and you come home and you're like, I just want to fill the void somehow, you might want to have the cookie, and that might not have anything to do with you actually being hungry. You might already be full, but you still want that cookie. Mm-hmm. No matter which of the 3 weight loss drugs you're using, that unfortunately will probably still remain the same.
I suppose you have a question to ask yourself if you are considering these is, am I going to be able to lose this weight? If losing weight is going to have an impact on your health, is the only way for me to lose this weight to take this GLP-1 drug, or am I able to do it on my own? And I think for a lot of people who have spent 30 years, 40 years, I have huge amounts of sympathy if you've never been able to lose that weight. If you have just consistently been getting more and more overweight, you've tried dieting 20 times, GLP-1s can really be that kind of key in the lock that opens you up into this new world of losing weight. And then once you've kind of knocked over that first domino and you've shifted that first 5, 10, 15 kilos in a year, you then start to reduce your dose and you've implemented some of the positive habits that are associated with the good nutrition. And so the sort of, I guess, optimal way to do that is, let's say you're overweight, you maybe take a GLP-1 for a sustained period of time, whether that be 9, 12, 16, 18 months, however long is recommended by the doctor. And then you gradually start to come off it. But it's very, very difficult because all of those signals that you turn down are going to slowly get turned back up, and you're going to start to feel a bit more hungry and you're going to start to feel less full. And you then have to combat your environment and combat your inner physiology with some of the skills required that everyone has to deal with when it comes to weight loss. So the willpower, the discipline, the strategies that we teach our clients that help them lose weight need to come in at some stage. And so it's almost the Wegovy, unless you're going to take it forever, is very much like a temporary turn down of this volume knob. And inevitably, again, presuming you're not going to stay on it forever, it will have to come back up. And you will have had to learn the skills required to stay on track. Otherwise, we're going to end up with weight regain.
And that is a very normal thing. Clinical trials, during clinical trials, what basically happens is you are very confined in what you can do. And there is some guidance to what you have to do after, but not much. So basically, it's an abrupt end from clinical trial to real life. And that abrupt change for a lot of people who were on these weight loss drugs did have some detrimental effects. Most people did regain their weight at a quicker rate even that they lost it. And a lot of that regain is simply fat. So exactly kind of the tissue that you wanted to get rid of in the beginning. the great thing is that real life surveys have shown more success. So while a big portion still does regain some weight, it's at least not 60 to 70% what we saw in clinical trials. And the reason being is that a lot of people in the survey were doing strength training while they were using these drugs. They were looking at high protein options. They were learning all the skills that is needed in order to maintain their weight after they kind of get off these weight loss drugs.
Yeah. No, I think we've seen, with some of our clients, huge efficacy with using these GLP-1s, huge life-changing results. But these are people who have used it very sensibly. And I think equally, we've seen people who don't use it for the right reasons and, present with all sorts of side effects and almost use it as a cheat code, if you like. And I don't like using that, but there are some people who view it in that way. And those are the people who definitely shouldn't be doing it. And usually the people who aren't super overweight anyway.
No, and that can then lead to other side effects, because even when it comes to NHS guidance and so on, they say that people who have any form of eating disorder shouldn't take those drugs. And that's the problem with administering them to people who are of a decently normal weight, is oftentimes that does come from an idea of not feeling kind of not enough. So the thing is then, how long do you take these drugs? Do you take them until you're basically underweight? And that can obviously then lead to even more adverse health effects. And so that is basically why they are not administered for people who are of a normal weight, because it can lead long term to down a slippery slope.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the main point I want to hammer home is the inputs of weight loss remain the same. Whether you're on a GLP-1 or whether you're using nutrition to lose weight without drugs, you are still putting yourself in a calorie deficit. There is nothing magical going on inside of your body besides those minor appetite changes. I shouldn't say minor. These quite large appetite changes are the only effects. And so, like I say, it's not like you're eating bowls and bowls of pasta and ice cream and still losing weight. That's not how it works. And so if you have that fantasy in your mind, don't buy into it, because you're still going to end up having to diet and having to train if you want the physique that you want to have eventually.
And I hope this podcast also has shown, because I see that online everywhere, that you should not shame people who are on those weight loss drugs. There is a lot of work involved with taking these drugs. It's not just you take it and then you can just sit on the sofa and do nothing. A lot of work has to be done while you use them. And as we've kind of honed down as well, for a lot of people, that has changed their life so much. And it is, for a lot of people, really the thing that they needed in order to get down to a healthy weight.
Yeah, it's almost like this ray of hope of like, oh, this thing might work for me. And so if you've been a perpetual dieter for 30 years, haven't been able to keep it off, then it's possibly worth having a conversation with your doctor.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Always have a conversation with your doctor. Don't try and buy it on the black market. Try through the NHS. That there are certain private clinics as well, but most of these do only administer to people who are clinically obese.
Well, hopefully that cleared up some of the myths, and now you are feeling more educated about GLP-1s. Hopefully we'll be back a little bit sooner with our next podcast episode. There'll be less of a break. But if you did enjoy it, please share it with a friend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.